Hello, hello, 1 2 3, 1 2 3. If you can hear me, if I'm coming in, will somebody please give me a yes or a thumbs up or anything just so that I know you're hearing me? Hello, hello. I'm not going to start till someone lets me know. There we go. There we go. Once again. Okay. I was waiting on someone to tell me if you could hear and see me or not, and I see that you could not now. I don't know what that weird glitch is. I see some of y'all talking about coming to the retreat already. Thank you, Dr. Price. I see some of y'all talking about coming to the retreat already, and that was uh, one of the reasons I called this live stream the Body of Light, is because that's what the retreat is going to be about this year. And I just want to talk about that for just a second. If you're not in Magnum Opus and haven't heard this, I can't remember what I've told everyone, what I haven't, but you saw today, I posted we went live with the retreat reservations tickets. And so far, no one who is not on Patreon has seen them. We wanted to give y'all first shot at it, just to show appreciation for your support, your time, your energy, your money, all the trust that you invest in us. We want to repay that. It's a little thing, but at least it's kind of like a gesture of respect, and appreciation. Just kind of acknowledging like what y'all are, like how you're the reason I'm sitting here doing this right now. I would not be doing this retreat if it wasn't for you guys. And I just wanted to show appreciation for that. The only thing that's going to be different this year is we're in a different venue, and it is an even better venue. We've reserved it already. It's at a chapel in Warwick, which is the town where Derek lives. And one thing about this town, one of the reasons I think it's going to be even more fun to have the retreat there is because there is an enormous magic shop there. Just opened up like a couple of months ago. I can't remember the name of it. It's called something like Light Shop Curiosities or Lighthouse Curiosities or something like that. It's kind of a strange name. But it is a massive magic store. So, stuff like that would be fun for people to be able to go to. We want to do it, and hopefully we'll end up even doing this eventually in other places. Like maybe we do this twice a year eventually. Do it once here in New York and once somewhere else, like maybe once in Salem or could be once in New Orleans or, wherever it is. But we want to do it in places where there's going to be more for people to enjoy besides just coming to the retreat. Last year we had some really great food brought in. We found someone who catered it. They did like gluten-free, vegetarian, all that kind of stuff, to make sure as much as we possibly could, we fit everyone's diet. And to me, honestly, the food was really great, very plain, a lot of stuff like spaghetti. But also one of the fun things about doing it in other places, eventually places bigger, that Warwick is a really, really small place. However, there are still decent restaurants, not only in Warwick, but also in the surrounding areas. There's some really great food up here, actually. But we wanted to do it so that if people wanted to branch off and maybe not particularly eat whatever we're having that day, there would be a bigger selection around them. So that's one of the reasons. Another one of the reasons why I think it's going to be better. There's just, a big selection of stuff down there, even outside of Warwick. Warwick is not a big town by any means. The other thing, what was it? Something about the retreat. Something about Warwick. Oh, the other thing about this venue is that there is more space. So the reason that I'm happy about that is because the thing that I want to do is y'all notice I'm kind of burned out on just repeating the same information over and over and over to people, that are just new to coming to magic, doing the middle pillar, doing the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, and just talking about that stuff over and over and over. Yes, that stuff has a time and a place, and it's incredibly important, and it is the very foundation of everything that we're doing. But at the same time, I'd like to, sometimes just talk about stuff, cover like little aspects of this work that don't necessarily tie into all the technical stuff. But one of the other things that I want to do, in that venue, like during my times, what I want to do during my presentations is actually do magic, like have people get up and a lot of it, since this ties into tonight's topic, the body of light. But what I kind of want to do is give people a chance who don't necessarily, have a chance in their normal lives to do magic with someone else, with other people. I want them to have that experience and see what it's like. Because that's one of the things that's missing from Magnum Opus is in some lodges, like some traditional orders or lodges, people meet up like once a month and they will go through ritual work. It is not by any stretch of the imagination a substitute for the work that you do on your own by yourself. It is not. If the only time you do magic is when you go to those meetings, you are going to be a very bad magician for a very long time. And then after a very long time, you'll get to the point of being a mediocre magician for a very long time. I don't think you'll necessarily always remain mediocre, but you will for a long time if that is the only time you do magic. The foundation of this work is doing magic by yourself. This has to be part of your daily, everyday life, as much as taking a shower and brushing your teeth. And part of that is connected to the topic of both the retreat and tonight's talk, which is the body of light. But one of the things that I want to do during my times, whenever I'm doing presentations, is have people do things like sometimes we'll pair off, like have people divide into, just two people, one person and a partner. And other times we may divide into groups of 10, do things that way. But do like a lot of energy circulation techniques, stuff that gives you some practice with doing energy work with other people. That was one of the things I used to love, like in the early days of magic. Just doing energy circulation practices like that. I used to do it when people would come visit me in prison. The biggest number of people I ever did it with at one time would have been four people, because that was the most that were allowed to come see me. But sometimes we would be sitting in the visitation room doing energy circulation exercises there. And that's the kind of stuff I want to do during my presentations at this retreat. The reason I'm talking about this is because it is a bigger venue. Remember last year, I think we could only have something like 70 people there, something like that. I can't remember exactly how much it was. I could be way off. But it was not 120 people. I know that. And that's what we can have this time. There is enough space to comfortably seat 120 people and still have plenty of room to get up and move around. So it will enable us to do magic, to do energy circulation practices. One of the reasons that this is so important, and this is very, very important, because what we're talking about is the energy body, or the body of light. And this is the foundation of every spiritual tradition and spiritual practice in the world, whether people really understand that or not. Some traditions, ancient traditions, understood this very, very well. Like in ancient Sumer, the very core of their entire religious system is built around the body of light. That's what all those stories mean. There were these stories about, they even continued into biblical times about garments. And even in the Bible now, whenever you read about garments, like people wearing robes. That's what they're talking about. They're talking about the energy body, Jacob and his coat of many colors, or in the book of Revelation, it talks about the saints all being given white robes, all that kind of stuff. All of those analogies or metaphors are about the body of light, which is, I hate using this word because it has so many flaky connotations in like New Age circles, but for all intents and purposes, it is the same thing as your aura. Well, in ancient Sumerian practices, what they were trying to do was pack as much energy into this body of light, into this aura, as they possibly could, to feed it. This is what I'm talking about whenever I talk about spiritual sustenance, that there's two reasons to do magic. One is for manifestation purposes. The other is for spiritual sustenance. This is spiritual sustenance. This is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something that has been done in all like long unbroken lineages of spiritual traditions all over the world. They were all about feeding, becoming aware and conscious of, working with, crystallizing, and exercising the body of light. Anytime you do any kind of energy work, you are using the body of light. The more powerful the body of light becomes, the more powerful your magic is going to become. Makes sense, doesn't it? Thing is, someone posted something on Instagram. I can't remember who it was. It might have even been you, Big Nurse. It's slipping my mind right now. Someone posted something that said it was, and I can't remember who the quote was by, but it said that our physical muscles do not get any bigger or stronger without being torn or ripped. So why would our spirit be otherwise? Because as above, so below. What you're doing is you are exercising your body of light the same way you would be exercising your physical body with physical exercise. When you do energy work, you are exercising your body of light. You're making it stronger the same way that doing exercise with your physical body makes your physical body stronger. In ancient Sumer, they talked about things like, and this is also in Japanese culture. In Japanese culture, they called it armor. There's a goddess, I think, I can't remember what her name is. It starts with an A, but they called the body of light the armor of whatever this particular god or goddess was named. I can't remember which one, but they called it the armor of this deity. Same thing. They're talking about the body of light. But what happens, like in ancient Sumer, the reason they would call it armor, like in ancient Sumer, they talked about how the more powerful, yes, that is it, Marilyn Jean, Amaterasu, yes. So what was I talking about? Body of light. Oh, they talked about how the more powerful the person's body of light grew, the more charismatic that person would be. That was one of the telltale signs. Basically what happens when you've packed this body of light completely and absolutely full of energy, it's going to keep radically changing the trajectory of your life in a lot of different ways, not just your consciousness, but also your external life. This is one of the things that I fully and completely credit to me getting out of prison. What I mean by that is you can only be in a situation or around people that resonate pretty closely to your energy and frequency. And we use words like high and low to describe this, but once again, these are metaphors, because what does that really mean? What does high and low mean on a level of reality where there really is no high or low? But we have to come up with words to describe it. We have to be able to articulate it or compare and contrast and pass on information. So we have to use some kind of terminology, but what I mean by like what usually happens is if you do not resonate at pretty close to the same frequency as the place where you currently live, or the people that you currently find yourself around, or the job that you find yourself presently working, whatever it is, if you do not resonate at close to the same frequency, you will be forced out of that situation in one way or another. Sometimes the easy way is you just wake up one day and you realize your time there's over. Your time in that relationship is over. Your time in that living in that particular location is over. Maybe your time in a particular spiritual tradition is over. Whatever it is, you'll realize that you've gotten out of it, pretty much all that there was in it that's going to keep you growing. And you'll know that you're not going to be happy if you stay in that situation. So without even thinking about magic, people do this all the time. Everybody in all walks of life makes decisions like this all the time. But what will happen is you'll decide to walk away from whatever it is. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be like a blatantly obvious walking away. It could be that you just gradually find yourself drifting away from a person, or you gradually find yourself just becoming more and more inclined to live somewhere else, whatever it is. Other times, there can be more of like a forceful ejection. And I think certain cities are very, very obvious and powerful about doing this. New Orleans, for example, I really do believe with all my heart that New Orleans is one of those places that either accepts you or does not accept you. And if it does not accept you, it is going to spit you out. And it is going to be very, very obvious that you don't belong there. What I mean by that is, even if you're doing everything you possibly can to succeed, doing everything you possibly can to build a productive, constructive life there, seems like something is always happening that makes that impossible. And it keeps happening until you decide one day, I can't take this anymore, I've got to go. New York will do the same thing. New York City, it will spit you out. It will either embrace you and take you in, or it will spit you out. And sometimes it does both. Sometimes it takes you in at first. It takes you in the very beginning, but then comes a time when you don't belong there anymore for whatever reason. You no longer resonate at the same frequency. It will spit you out. I have a suspicion, I can't say for 100% certain because I haven't lived everywhere, but I do have a suspicion that I think to a greater or lesser degree, most places are like that. I don't know how we got way off on this topic, this subject. Oh, just that one of the things that you'll tend to find if you keep doing this work, consistently day after day, even if you're not doing magic for anything, one of the things that you tend to find is your life continues to change for the better anyway. Doesn't mean there won't be hiccups, situations that have to be, dealt with in some way that aren't particularly pleasant for you to break through them and grow. But when you look at your life and you look back in hindsight, you'll realize you climbed. Your whole life you kept climbing. You kept rising. If you do these practices that have been done since ancient Sumer, which is what we're doing right now when we're doing magic. But other lineages, they all have something to do, and like even the Tibetan Buddhists, in Tibetan Buddhism, the rainbow body. Same thing. It's the body of light. Rainbow body, diamond body, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same thing. My point with all of this is that kind of what I want to do is spend time working, listening to all the lectures in the world. Yes, it is very important. Intellectual knowledge, history, all of those kinds of things about the stuff are very, very important. But by far, the most important thing is the work, doing the work. If you do it enough, long enough, sooner or later, you'll come to understand it. But just because you understand it, like from lectures and talks and books and things like that, just because you have an intellectual understanding of it doesn't mean that that's like the equivalent of somebody who has read a ton of books about lifting weights, but who's never actually lifted weights. It's not going to have the same effect. You may know a lot about it. You may know a lot about the history of it, the mechanics of it, the pros and cons, and all kinds of other stuff, but knowing all that stuff is still not going to give you the same body as if you've actually lifted the weights. Same way with magic, same way with the energy body. Even I saw something somebody else had put up talking about, Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel. The image on the Sistine Chapel of God and Adam, and they're reaching out like they're going to touch fingers. Somebody pointed out that what you see when you're looking at that, if you look closely at the details of it, is that God, the figure that represents God, is reached all the way out. His arm is straight, his fingers out as far as it would go, like he is reaching like all the way out towards Adam. Adam, on the other hand, their fingers are only like this far apart. But Adam, if you look at him, look at his posture, look at what he's doing, he's half-assing it. He's just kind of lounging on the cloud with his arm up, like there's still a bent place in his arm, and his finger is not out straight like God's is. Adam's finger is kind of bent a little bit. His hand is more like this, whereas God's is reaching out straight towards him. That represents how that last little bit between us and God, we are the ones responsible for bridging that gap. God has reached out. God is reaching out towards us. But we're never going to bridge that gap and touch God, be in the presence of God, if we don't try, which Adam isn't trying. He's not putting forth a lot of effort. Working the body of light, feeding the body of light, exercising the body of light. This is the work. This is how Adam, which is us, reaches back towards God. Max says it's a limp royal gesture. Give me 1 second. Let me see what y'all are talking about. Yeah, Jacob Kennedy says it's interesting that it's Adam's left hand. I never even thought of that. Exactly. Who says that? Adam. Adam Black says Rose Cross ritual helps with veiling accumulated light. That's exactly what it is. When you start to accumulate more and more of that light through these rituals, what starts to happen is people start to notice a difference in you. You are not going to be like other people anymore. I don't mean there's going to be something supernatural or anything else. Not in the way that most people use that word. But your life just starts, starts to flow a little easier. Once again, does not mean that you aren't going to experience ups and downs. You are, but while you're experiencing those external ups and downs, you're more internally balanced. You're not jumping all over the place internally anymore, experiencing all of that fear, anxiety and depression and despair and all of those things that we normally go through whenever our life is going up and down. It's like our internal world mirrors our external world. What happens more and more is your internal world becomes calmer. Your external world may keep changing, but even that eventually take in mind, as within, so without. When you do calm what's going on inside here, eventually that's going to be reflected externally in your external life. There may be some waves you have to go through before you get to that point. But as above, so below, as within, so without. The more calm you become internally, even when life is giving you all kinds of ups and downs, the more eventually your life is going to be on a more even keel also. I had a friend one time that didn't even notice this stuff till I pointed it out to him. We were talking about things in life that weren't necessarily how we would particularly want them to be or whatever it was. And I can't remember how one thing led to another, but the point we came to in the conversation, I said, the thing is, one thing that you start to realize whenever you do this work every single day is you don't feel all that angst you used to feel in your life. So many people are just absolutely miserable because they are filled with angst and anger and strife and turmoil and sadness and lack of purpose and all of that kind of stuff. I said, one thing you find the more you do this work, the more and more you kind of leave that stuff behind. And he stopped for a minute dead in his tracks and he goes, I didn't even realize it till you said that, but I used to get depressed all the time and I don't really get like that anymore. But he didn't really notice it until, it came up in conversation. That's another one of the effects that feeding the body of light has. Let's see, go to the end of y'all's comments. Yeah, just reading what y'all are talking about. Some people saying they experienced anxiety, some people anger, fear and despair, that all of that stuff was kind of stirred up whenever they first started doing magic. So that's kind of one of the lessons of that, that painting is that God helps those who help themselves. And when you're doing magic, you're helping yourself. And let me see, it seems like there was something else I wanted to read to y'all, talk about a little bit. Yeah. The astrological stuff, the actual work. Like I said, everything that we're doing, what kind of this, when you look at magic and you really understand what this stuff is for and how it works and what it's doing to you on different levels, the more you start to realize wherever this came from, wherever this work originated from, it fits together in a way that is so flawless and perfect and precise that you would almost swear that it can't be the product of the human intellect, that it had to have been given to us from some outside source. What I mean by that is everything that we're doing is based on celestial phenomena. Like what some people call, when you're doing this work, you experience what some people call celestial ascension. And you find that in like in the book of Ezekiel, the prophet Ezekiel, what he's describing is being taken in this chariot up through the heavens, and he sees the wheels within wheels covered with eyes and all this kind of stuff to stand before the throne of God. That's what we mean when we talk about things like celestial ascension. We're talking about going up to the heavens. Well, what that comes from is, once again, going back to that saying, as within, so without. Then also, other side of the coin is as without, so within. What somehow, some way, someone figured out is that certain celestial phenomena going on in the heavens is mirrored within us. What I mean by that is, let's take, for example, the 7 planets, the 7 classical planets of, classical astrology, classical hermeticism, classical magic, classical alchemy, whatever you want to call it. It utilizes or focuses on 7 planets. It's not a coincidence that when you look to Eastern traditions, they also talk about having 7 chakras. Each of those chakras corresponds to levels of your aura. Think about it as like each of those energy centers are emanating a different level of your aura. So you would have 7 levels or layers of your aura, one produced by each of the 7 chakras. Well, in the Western system, that's mirrored in the 7 planets. One of the layers of your aura is a reflection or a correspondence of one of the 7 planetary energies. Does this make sense? Same way, there are also parts within our psyche and parts within our energy system that correspond not only to the planets, but also to the constellations, to the fixed stars, all of that kind of stuff. I'll give you one example, the North Star. This is another thing, like all of the stories of the Western world, all of the old myths and legends and all that kind of stuff, the old Greek legends, the old Greek myths and the old Roman myths and, mythology, all that kind of stuff, that is all stories about the interaction of heavenly bodies, different planets going into different constellations, whatever, however you want to look at it. The example I always come back to is, because people love Medusa, is that Medusa, the star of Medusa, is what in the fixed stars they call Algol. Algol was considered like the most, just horrific star to invoke. That it brought all kinds of malefic energies to bear on a situation whenever it was invoked. That's all I'll say. I'll describe it that way because I don't think, for the most part, it's something that most people should be working with in the very beginning. I think it's something you should work your way up to. But Medusa is just a star in the constellation of Perseus. Like if you look at the constellations and you pick out the one of Perseus, Medusa would be the star that is symbolized by the head of the Gorgon. All of those things have corresponding energies or corresponding levels, I guess you would say. I'm at a loss for words sometimes trying to explain this, but all of them have corresponding something within us. And whenever we focus on each of these things specifically, what we're doing is working on and with the part of ourself that corresponds to it. This is why they say there's like a that whenever you work with, say, like a planetary energy, it does, two things to you. Let's say Jupiter, for example. When you're working with Jupiter, it makes you, and you're doing it consistently for a long period of time, it makes you more generous, and it also makes you more prosperous, because those things are two sides of the same coin. You can't just hold prosperity. Money is supposed to flow, and not just money, but all resources are supposed to flow to you and through you out into the world. So it makes you more prosperous, but it also makes you more generous. Or let's say, for example, Venus, when you're invoking Venus every day. Venus makes you, more agreeable and, I'm trying to think of the word to use, makes you have a greater appreciation for sensuality, or increases or enhances the energy of sensuality within you. But it also does the same thing to the energy of fidelity. So once again, all of these energies do two different things to you, but you see what they're doing is kind of balancing you out in a certain way. And one thing that I keep hammering away at now, trying to make people understand, because so many people look at spirituality and spiritual practice as something to do until they get bored with it. Something to do until the new thing comes along or comes out. People always want something different, something new. Whenever you first introduce people to the practices of magic and get them started doing stuff like the lesser banishing, middle pillar, all that kind of stuff, they're always excited in the beginning. They're excited because it's new to them and they're getting to experience changes within themselves and all this kind of stuff, but it's all a new, novel experience. But eventually there comes a time when even a novel experience can grow monotonous. Yeah, Sarah W. says whatever the latest celebrity trend is. What was my point? What was I talking about? Oh, my point is, it's not that there is an infinite amount of rituals to learn with this stuff. You're not going to keep learning new things in that regard forever. When you understand this stuff, when you have a thorough understanding of it, which, to be honest, most of y'all probably do, then have probably more of an understanding for this stuff by now than I would say 75-80% of people in the world of magic do. They didn't understand. Most people in the world of magic don't even understand that this is, like a path, that there's a destination, somewhere we're supposed to be trying to reach, mile markers that we're supposed to be, trying to meet. And then the next part after you know that is learning the rituals to do to get you to those mile markers, the rituals to do daily to get you to the end of that path. That's the second part. Third part is doing them constantly, every day. Barring some unforeseen circumstance like sickness or something, you do them every day. But most people, a lot of people always just want something new. Once they get bored, they don't want to do it anymore. Once it gets monotonous, they don't want to do it anymore. They want something new to try out. Well, once you know how to do magic, there's really not going to be too much new anymore, because you're going to see, once you really understand magic, you're going to look around at any other spiritual tradition out there and you're going to know what it is, and you're going to know that basically you're already doing it or you've already done it, just in a different form. For example, when you're working with the Goetia, most people do not know that the Goetia, they think of it as demons and it's edgelordy or trendy or whatever to work with them and all that kind of stuff. They don't understand that those demons of the Goetia are just 5 degrees of the zodiac, which are the exact same thing that the 72 angels of the Shem operation are. It's just different faces on the synergy. So you'll be able to see that in other traditions. You'll be able to understand what it means. For example, I saw a story come out in the past week or so. It was something to do with a Native American tribe somewhere. I can't remember where it was, but the story was just in mainstream media. It was just like this little side curiosity piece about how a white buffalo calf, like a literal white buffalo calf, had been born somewhere, and people were saying that because there was this Native American legend from a long time ago that whenever a white buffalo was born, that this would happen or that would happen or what have you. And they once again take it to mean something literal, which is really absolutely no different from people who think Jesus is going to literally raise them from the grave and they're going to be seen flying up into the air to live in a palace of gold somewhere in the clouds. Taking one of those things as absolute concrete truth is no different from taking the other one as absolute concrete proof. Neither one of those things are meant to be taken at face value. It's symbolism. The whole story of Christ and the disciples and all of that stuff is all symbolism. The same way, stories about buffaloes or whatever it is in whatever tradition in the world, it's symbolism for celestial phenomena. If you start digging into these different cultures and traditions and stuff like that, one of the things you'll find, for example, is, I can't tell you off the top of my head what this is, the answer to this, but you can just look up, for example, you could, Google what constellation is symbolized by the buffalo. And sure enough, one will come up. You'll find, as a matter of fact, there was a constellation in Native American iconography that was represented by the buffalo. What that being born means is something to do with cycles. So you see what I mean is when you really understand magic, you understand that there is nothing else. There's nothing else to hop to or jump to. It's not going to do you any good to want to be, a hermeticist or an alchemist this week and a shaman the next week and a Celtic druid the week after that. And I'm being a little facetious here. Most people don't go through these things like in a matter of weeks, but they do in a matter of years a lot of times. But you realize that there's almost no point in tradition hopping like that or looking for anything new because you're doing the exact same work. So why bother to change? You're just kind of costing yourself time, really, because then you're going to have to understand what all that stuff symbolizes. Marilyn Jean. Yeah, John McFadden. John McFadden says it's like the red heifer in Israel. Same thing. Exact same thing. Marilyn Jean says desire is a great leader / driver of the sire / source. One of the things about desire also, did you know desire comes from a Latin phrase? Let me see. I don't want to mangle this. So the etymology of the word desire, etymology means the sources that it comes from. One of these sources is the phrase in Latin. There's a phrase in Latin that means from the stars. So desire, the word desire comes from a Latin phrase meaning from the stars, and has, connections with astrology. That's stuff like that's not a coincidence. This is what I mean by whoever understood this stuff, wherever this stuff came from, it's almost something that's beyond, our ability as you would have to be really, really smart, so much smarter than me that I can't even begin to understand that level of intelligence to come up with this kind of stuff, to create these kind of correspondences and links. We always say that in magic, one of the things you're attempting to do is break the chains which bind you to the stars. That's another way of saying, just like in Buddhist terminology, to transcend desire. They're not talking about the stars out there, they're talking about the stars in here. Just reading what y'all are talking about. Give me 1 second. I'm talking about some interesting stuff. Some of it is over my head. So a lot of people get disappointed whenever they realize, and this is kind of what we're going through, kind of expressing to people in the original, the old school magnum opus groups, is that once you've learned of some certain things, you've learned enough that you could technically, with where you are, if you're in the original magnum opus group, the group that's been working with us for a year and a half, you know either all you need to know or almost all you need to know, depending on how much you've heard me talk about invoking the fixed stars and how to do that, like the different layering of energies and all the different things you have to invoke, depending on how much of that you've done and understand and all that kind of stuff. You either have enough or almost enough to finish this work. There's no point like leading you through things step by step anymore. You've got the rituals. You know how to do the rituals. All we can help with now is little things like digging deeper into the stuff, because there's always ways to get better at it. And there are always ways to understand it more. Just like when we're talking about things like the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, once you know how to do it, you know how to do it. But there's always ways of wringing a little more out of it, whether we're talking about like the meaning of the symbolism or all of that kind of stuff. Whatever it is, that's what we're trying to do now. You already know, you've got the ingredients. What we're trying to do is go into them and try to, give you as much as we can possibly give you to deepen your understanding of these things, to help you wring as much out of them as you possibly can. A lot of orders and lodges and things like that kind of want to do the opposite of that. They want you dependent upon them forever. And a lot of it is because usually you get somebody at the top position who doesn't want to let go of that because it makes them feel special in some way or something. So, and they lord it over other people, all that kind of stuff. Pretty much everybody who's ever been around the magic world has seen that kind of stuff take place at some time or another on some level or another. This stuff can be very, very exacerbating to the ego, is my point. And some people's ego gets addicted to, Some people's egos get addicted to being a teacher, to receiving attention from people or respect from people or whatever it is, and they want to continue to get that. And in Magnum Opus, that is not one of the things that we um, desire or are focused on whatsoever. What we want to do is get you what you need to do this work and then kick you out of the nest like a baby bird and watch you fly off. Yeah, Sarah says some people need to be needed. That's a good way to put it. Jacob, you said exactly what our hope is, what we're hoping that we do for you. Jacob says, it's really something to have a mentor still providing insight, even when you have all the mechanical instructions down. That is exactly what we seek to do and assist with. And you just described it far more eloquently than I have. I sat here babbling for the past 15 minutes about it. You summed it up into one sentence. That's pretty much it. That is what we try to do. Anyway, kind of to wrap this up a little bit, one other thing I wanted to talk about is the mental things that happen to you whenever you're doing this work. Yes, you're doing these things like you're working on the body of light. When you're invoking all of these different forces, one of the reasons you're invoking them all is because there is something within your body of light that corresponds to each of those forces. And you're feeding it, you're exercising it, all of that stuff whenever you're invoking the force that corresponds to it. One of the mental things that happen, people say stuff all the time like how the material world doesn't matter. They'll say, everything is all one anyway. All this is just an illusion. And a lot of that depends on how you look at it and what you mean by that. Because, if you hit your finger with a hammer, you can tell yourself that this is an illusion all you want to. It is not going to change the amount of pain you are experiencing. And that is the same for emotional pain, mental pain, any of that kind of stuff. Telling yourself that this is an illusion is not going to decrease any of that. So it's a very, very real illusion. But the thing is, I don't think it is an illusion anymore. I don't think that's an apt metaphor for describing it. I would say the way I look at it now, the thing that helps me understand this more is not that this world is an illusion, but that two things can be true at once. Just because one thing is true doesn't necessarily make another thing less true. What I mean by that is we are all one consciousness. We are one individual consciousness looking out through the eyes of every man, woman, and child in this world. We are one. We are one thing. But because of the way that consciousness has chose to enter into this world and enter into human bodies, we experience individuality. So think of it like you've got this veil, you've got this layer, you've got this thin line. And on this side, this side of this line is a singularity, a singular consciousness. We're all one. And on this side of that line, there is individuality. We are all unique, distinct fractals. that descended from that one consciousness. Both of those things are true at the same time. That's part of the union of opposites. Yeah, Sarah W. says, two things can be true at once has been a life-changing concept for me. You have to unite those two things. That's what the union of opposites is. You unite those two things and you realize that just because one is true doesn't mean the other can't also be true. And we use the metaphor to walk with a foot in each world, or to walk with a foot in two different worlds. That's another metaphor. You know, you don't literally have your foot in a different world, not in the way most people would understand that phrase. But it's a metaphor for accepting and experiencing and knowing that two things can be true at once. Yeah, that's another thing. Bacon Nurse says, sometimes I see too much of both things are true and no decision or choice can be made. I've experienced that also. Absolutely. You know, you become almost like a dog chasing its own tail. It becomes very, very hard to make a choice or a decision. And I think that's one of the things where divination or turning within and being able to listen to that still small voice within you, that's where that comes into play. In a situation like that, the outcome is usually not going to be completely and absolutely perfect, but you'll be able to choose the better thing to focus on, you know, one way or the other. Because if you listen to that still small voice within, it's going to guide you. That's it. Adam Black says decisions from the heart. Yep, exactly. Exactly. KS Moon says head in the clouds but feet on the ground. Yes. Okay. I am going to get off of here for the night because I've kind of fallen out of my habit. I'm supposed to only be doing these for 30 minutes, and we're gradually creeping up on an hour, sometimes a little longer than an hour. And I appreciate that out of y'all, that you would sit here for that long and listen to me rambling like a crazy person. I appreciate the fact that you get something out of this like that. I did want to say, what is today? Yeah, today's the 3rd. In just a few hours, it is going to be the 4th of July. So I don't know if you're doing anything. Honestly, I don't particularly do anything. Maybe my big extravaganza for the day will be that I eat some ice cream. Don't really do the whole fireworks thing, whatever. But whatever it is that you do tomorrow, I hope that you have the day off of work. I hope that you get to relax, to be with family and friends, and that you get to do something that is going to create a great memory that you're going to enjoy looking back on for a long time. Long story short, happy 4th of July. Yes, Sarah W. says, my cats don't like fireworks. Mine do not either. They do not either. All right, guys, I'm going to shut up and get off of here. Thank y'all for, I'm going to send out an email probably tomorrow. If you're in Magnum Opus, I'm sending out the email tomorrow, letting each group know when we're going to be meeting up. I'm going to try to get those out tomorrow on the 4th of July. I'll let you know. It's going to be towards the middle to end of the month, this month. All right, guys. Thank you so much for humoring and supporting me. Have a good night. Have a happy 4th of July, and I will talk to you in a couple of days.